Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces here today. I'm very glad to be here and talk to all of you about a subject that I am extremely passionate about, and that is entrepreneurship. When Richard first asked me to speak this morning about our experience launching businesses, he said that I'd be talking for about an hour. And I thought to myself, wow, that is a really long time to talk. So I sat down and started making a lot of notes about everything that I wished we would have known before we started our first businesses. And for an entrepreneur, the word, experience is really synonymous with, just all the mistakes that we've made. So I thought about all those mistakes over the years, and before I knew it, I had about 3 hours of material for this morning. So my challenge really turned out to be paring it down. I'm glad kind of Fred said the same thing, instead of filling it up. Over the last 16 years, my partners and I have started 8 different businesses here in Richmond. And I served as the day-to-day operating CEO in the first 4 of those companies, exiting 3 as they were acquired by public firms over the years. We currently own and operate 5 different businesses, and they range in age from about 10 years old all the way down to our newest, which is about 3 months. I'm the CEO of our holding company, which is called High Technology Holdings. And these days, I primarily spend my time working as an advisor with our 5 management teams, really leading our angel investing activities, and really working with other entrepreneurs to do what I can to help them get their new ventures going. Today I'll share with you the most important lessons we've learned over those 8 startups, and hopefully leave you with some practical advice on launching your own. And I found the opportunity to put those lessons to use fairly early. When I was 21, I landed a job at a technology consulting firm in Raleigh, North Carolina. They all seemed to, I was very surprised, I guess, at the lack of employee loyalty that the public consulting firm had. And I was also a little surprised that they seemed to focus more on squeezing all the money that they could out of their clients instead of doing what was right for their clients. Suffice it to say that their values and my values did not match up very well. A year later, I was introduced to a man out of Charlotte who was an entrepreneur, and he offered me the opportunity to start my own IT business back here in Richmond. He would provide the financial backing, and I would come back to Richmond and get the sales and marketing and recruiting going. And I didn't have a lot of experience, but I did have a genuine sense of purpose. I wanted to build a better firm, one that was truly dedicated to taking care of its employees and its clients. And I realized that businesses born out of passion still sometimes failed in practicality. I had never made a sales call. I didn't have any management experience. And I did not have a good network of technology contacts back here in Richmond. So being a very naive 23-year-old, I weighed all of those risks and decided, oh heck, I'm just going to jump in and try this. When you're 23, you really don't have a whole lot to lose. So I started that business in my condo back here in Richmond on my dining room table. The first few months were very, very rough. There were times that I definitely wondered if I had made the right decision. But the business began to grow and I needed help. So I hired my husband's best friend, his brother, my best friend since the 6th grade, college friends, friends of friends. We had a great time working together, and that's an understatement. By the end of our 2nd year, we had 100 employees in that business. And there was definitely a learning curve for all of us during those years. And we did work all the time, but it didn't really seem like work. We were very passionate about building something great, and it was just exciting and challenging and the most fun that I could have ever imagined. And I got to work with my best friends all day, every day. The fact that it became financially lucrative, to me, was just icing on the cake. So if you get discouraged by the fact that you've never done a startup before, don't be, because sometimes I honestly believe that a lack of experience can be a good thing. You don't know what you don't know. The company was acquired by a public firm just a few years after we started it. And I guess I probably could have retired, but all of my friends were back at the office, so I would have had no one to play with. I'd hired them all. And we spent about another 18 months to 2 years doing M&A for the parent company. Then I got pregnant, decided traveling wasn't for me, and 2 of our managers transitioned as partners with me into our second business, which was an interactive solutions firm in Richmond called Tecna. The other 2 managers that we had went on to start up our third company, which is called Fahrenheit Technology, the following year. And in 1998, we merged that interactive firm with a company out of Atlanta. We IPO'd the following year, and that was a very exciting time. Remember, our stock went from $10 to $50, and the NASDAQ was on fire. But being part of a public company, again, was pretty stifling to an entrepreneur. And in 2000, I was definitely ready for a change. Wanting a completely new challenge and having 2 very young daughters, I started a hobby business called Posh Tots, which sold luxury children's furniture. My hobby took on a life of its own over the next few years, and it was acquired by a firm in 2006. By that time, my partners and I had started several other businesses along the way. Today, we still own Fahrenheit Technology. We just had our 10th anniversary. Ironworks Consulting is here in town. They're 8 years old. They're a project-based firm. The senior managers we had at Tecna are now the executive management team at Ironworks. Raceit is a software company that provides online registration and payment processing for hundreds of marathons and sport races around the country. They were actually a spin-off of a pro bono project that we did for sports backers here. They're 3 years old. Genesis Consulting we started a year ago. They provide ERP consulting and data management services, and Partner JD is our newest addition to our family, and they provide legal staffing and partner placement services, and they just launched about 3 months ago. So knock on wood, they're all doing well, but we have made plenty of mistakes along the way, and we've had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way, and we've had to learn them the expensive way. These businesses are definitely living proof that you can make mistakes, learn from them, and keep growing. I gathered several of my partners' input for this morning, and I'd like to share with you the 9 things that we believed were most helpful in launching those businesses. Some of the things that we recommend doing before we start a venture, some are the most important lessons we learn consistently making ventures successful. So I believe the first step for anyone considering starting their own business is to really evaluate why you want to own your own business. I often ask this question when I talk to students here every semester, as well as with people seeking investment capital. Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And typically I hear 3 answers. I hear flexibility, freedom, and financial rewards. And unfortunately, none of those things are probable outcomes the first few years that you own a business. In our experience with all 8 of our startups, the first 2 years are typically a blur of stress, sleeplessness, incredibly long hours, all fueled by a lot of caffeine. And if you ask any successful entrepreneur what his first few startup years were like, you will never hear them say words like, I was feeling free and flexible. Never happens. To add to the stress, most first-time entrepreneurs often miscalculate how long it's going to be before they can prudently take distributions back out of their business. Once you get your startup in the black, it's probably going to take all the cash you've generated to fuel continued growth. Making a profit definitely does not equal making money that you can put in your pocket. You have to be in it for the long haul, and the financial rewards don't typically come back to you for quite a while, which leads us to our second thing, is prior to committing to a startup, define your passion and your purpose. These are the 2 things that are going to get you going and keep you going through those first few years when you are stressed and completely overworked. When you're clear about what drives you, what your core values are, and your new venture aligns with those things, you are going to drastically increase your chance of success. I believe we're all naturally pulled towards what makes us feel individually productive. A person's inherent passion reflects what they ideally like to spend their time and energy engaged in. It motivates them to accomplish big things and acts like a compass, always pointing us in the right direction. Ask yourself what you're deeply passionate about. What do you feel like you were just born to do, and is that the underlying purpose of pursuing this new venture? For most entrepreneurs, money is a byproduct of operating a venture that they are truly passionate about. The greatest business success stories in the most admired cultures, think like Disney, Nike, Starbucks, Apple, Google, all of those companies had a higher purpose that was driven by their founders from day one. Their mission was not just about making money when they started. This alignment of purpose and passion between the management team and the business has been the single biggest contributing factor to having launched 8 successful startups. Those early years aren't easy, and you really have to firmly believe in what you're doing. My husband insisted on me adding this next one to the list. And my partners that I talked to, we all agreed that if you have one, the third thing that we suggest doing is sitting down and really having a heart-to-heart with your spouse before you go down this path. It is so important to have them buy in to this new life as you being an entrepreneur. Be realistic about taking this journey together and ask the tough questions. Do they understand, and can they support and counterbalance the work commitment and the time that this is going to take? The long hours, the travel, the financial risk, are they in? There are constant phone calls, emails, preoccupation, even when you're at home those first few years. And I'd also suggest discussing with them, having a very candid conversation about the worst possible case scenario before you get into it. What would happen to you and your family if you lost your investment in the business did not make it? What would that do to your marriage? What would that do to your personal finances? There's a paradox to the debate of when is the best time in your life to start a business. We all get more experience as we get older, and we advance in our careers, and hopefully our paychecks grow, but the more we have, the more we have to lose. And the less likely our spouses may be in us supporting us in risk like that as we get a little older. Now you can flip that around and have the fun part of that conversation is what it would be like if your venture is wildly successful, and if you could be financially secure for the rest of your life in 5, 10 years. Decide together if that risk is really worth the reward. And if you decide that you both want to go down this path, then devise a plan to get better prepared. Lower your costs as much as you can. Figure out what you can really live on during those startup years. And always, always plan for it taking longer than you thought it was going to take. That has happened to most of the new entrepreneurs that I've known. However, I would say prior to launching a business, I think that is the only time that you really want to go down the path of having that if it fails conversation. I think an entrepreneur needs to have that candid discussion with their potential business partners and their spouse before they get into a new business. But once you commit, we all firmly believe that that question should never come up again. Your mindset has to be that failure is not an option, and that business will absolutely not fail. Because number 4, once you're committed, there is absolutely no turning back. Don't second guess yourself. Put on your blinders and just go. Just run as fast as you can. Don't let yourself or anyone else start thinking about a fallback plan when things get tough, because those first few months or few years are going to be tough. The time for all of that was before you commit. And also, I guess our advice is to be prepared for a good bit of pessimism. Anticipate the fact that many people are going to tell you why they believe your new venture is not going to work. When I moved back to Richmond to start our first company, a lot of people told me that I would never break into the Richmond technology community. I must have had 10 people tell me that it was an old boys network. I'd never get in. And honestly, I really didn't know what that meant. I was 23. I didn't have any problem working with men. But I was really surprised at how many people were just emphatic that that idea would not work, that it would just not be successful. I had people tell me I was crazy for trying something so risky, leaving a good paying job for something so iffy. But opportunity is everywhere. Some people see it easier than others, and it's only found by those looking for it. Most of you in this room must have that mindset, or I doubt that you would be here this morning. Your optimistic spirit needs to be strong because you are going to hear a lot of pessimism along the way. And expect to encounter naysayers long after your startup phase. In 2002, we hired a national expert on print catalogs to come into Podge Tots and help us with our strategy for our first print catalog. It was the biggest investment at the time that we had made in that business. And our vision was to create this 100-page catalog of a lot of the items that we carried, those very extraordinary custom-designed furnishings. We would create an annual catalog each year, and we send it to our customer base and other mailing lists that we wanted to test out, and a very extensive list of our PR contacts. And our intent was to drive PR in addition to direct catalog sales by having some of our most extravagant items featured throughout it. And when I was done explaining this concept to the catalog expert, this gentleman leaned over the conference table to me, and he looked at me just very defiantly, and he said, "No one has ever done anything like that in the kids' business, and that will never work." So in return, I asked the obvious question, well, if no one's ever done anything like that before, how do you know it's not going to work? Because our extremely affluent customer demographic was not very applicable to other retailers in our space, like a Pottery Barn Kids. So I didn't understand how you could really run a meaningful model to predict catalog ROI. He didn't really have a concrete answer as to why it was going to fail, but he was absolutely certain that it just wouldn't work. Kind of like those people were absolutely certain that that first business didn't work in Richmond. So we recognized that this man, he knew a whole lot about the catalog business, but we knew a whole lot about our customers, and we knew a lot about what drove PR. We just had a gut feeling that this idea would drive a lot of PR, and a lot of PR drove a lot of sales for that business. So if you tell an entrepreneur that their idea definitely won't work without giving them a really concrete reason why, that is a surefire way to get them even more committed to their idea. So I'm sure you can all guess what we did. Andrea and I created that catalog, and long story short, it was definitely a success in terms of measurable ROI. As a result of the PR that it generated, we were on several national talk shows and hundreds of magazines and newspapers, and again, all of that PR drove even more sales, and just simply that gentleman turned out to be wrong. So whether it's starting your own business or whether it's making strategic decisions along the way, there are going to be many naysayers. Listen to them, consider their perspective, consider their advice, but also trust your own judgment. Launching and growing a business is much more of an art than it is a science. Number 5 on my list of things to share today, and I think this is probably the most important advice that we can offer, is to choose your business partners very carefully and have the tough conversations with them up front going in. When I asked my partner at Ironworks yesterday, what he would want to know if he could talk to his former self back then, he said that first. He said, we really got that right. And along the years that we've been creating businesses, we've seen a lot of others fail for that one reason. A business partnership is very much like a marriage. It's really easy to get into, and it's really hard to get out of it when things go wrong. It takes a lot of work to maintain a good one, so make sure you really know someone and you enjoy spending time with them before you commit to being business partners. Many people will also advise you against hiring your friends and your family members. I've heard people say, not to have a business partner at all unless you absolutely have to. And I can certainly understand that point of view if you've had a partnership go wrong. But I make a strong argument for having a partner if you find the right fit, and I believe in the old saying that 2 heads are definitely better than 1. A few years ago, a university study reported that 94% of all hyper-growth companies were started by 2 or more people. But not surprisingly, the success rate of new ventures with 2 partners is vastly better than a startup with 4 or more partners. So things just get more complicated as you add more personalities into the mix. So here are some practical things to build a good foundation for a long-term business partnership. First, kind of like our advice with your spouse, is to sit down and have a really candid conversation with anybody that is a potential partner about your mutual expectations. Openly acknowledge what your own weaknesses are and ask your partner to do the same. Recognize that there are some areas that you can both improve on, and there are some things that you just probably aren't going to change. Accept those and focus on creating a well-balanced team. Talk about what your vision is for the business over the long haul. Do you both see yourself in the business 10 years from now? Do you want to expand into other markets? If so, are you both up for traveling? How much? Make sure you see eye to eye on the vision for the business and the effort that it's going to take to achieve it. Is everyone realistic about the long hours and the sacrifice? I strongly suggest getting a good business attorney. After you've had those conversations, sit down with a business attorney who can help you think through all of the what-if scenarios that can arise over time. Have the tough conversations with each other before you even commit to being partners. A good attorney will steer you through conversations like what happens in case of one of your partners gets into a divorce and the company gets thrown into that. What happens if one of your partners becomes disabled? What happens if one of your partners in 5 years just wants out for some reason? What do you do if one partner wants to hire a key employee that another doesn't? What's the process for resolving all of those situations? And how would your buy-sell agreement work? That document is one of the most important documents that you will ever create as a business owner. Think down every possible future scenario and thoroughly understand how your buy-sell agreement would play out. Discuss things like expectations for distributing cash along the way. Do you leave it in to fund growth in receivables, or do you take it out and run a line of credit? There'll be a spectrum of factors to consider when the time to make that decision is at hand, but it's helpful to understand each partner's basic philosophy on that issue up front. If you're going to run a line of credit, who can and will personally sign for it? Is one partner going to be more on the hook than another? They may have to be if they have substantially more assets. Do you know the bank's requirements to give you a line of credit? Because now's a good time to find out before you actually need it. Get all of the tough stuff that you can possibly think of amongst yourselves and with the help of a good attorney out on the table. Look at it, talk about it, decide on it, memorialize it in writing, and understand everyone's expectations going in. After all of this, if you still want to be partners, just remember to keep a long-term perspective. Over the years, each of us have gone through periods that required other partners to carry more of the burden. If you're the one picking up the slack, we learned it's best to just bite your tongue, do your best to support your partner, and know that they will do the same for you, because you could be next. Having children, taking care of aging parents, family crisis, it's all part of life. It's all part of everyone's life. We found it's also very helpful to just get the partners out of the office, especially during that early stage. During those years, we go to an annual conference together, although I have to admit we rarely made it to the sessions because we were usually having our own session out by the pool with a pitcher of margaritas, and we could solve all kinds of business problems with a pitcher of margaritas. The purpose was mainly team building and having a good time together. And we all went from being single 20-somethings to getting married and having children, and we've now begun to take an annual partner trip. It's kind of a boondoggle trip and include all of our families and our children every year. Over time, we really learned that when your partner is also one of your closest friends, you do a much better job of keeping the bigger picture in perspective and just letting the small stuff go. A student here once asked me, what was my biggest career accomplishment? And I'm very proud of each of our businesses, but the thing that I'm really most proud of is the fact that those 4 friends that I hired 16 years ago are still my business partners today. Our relationship has definitely weathered a whole lot of changes over the years, but they are still my favorite folks. So don't be afraid to disregard popular opinion on having multiple partners or hiring your friends if you go through that kind of process to make up your mind. Pick the right people, cover the tough stuff, and keep a realistic perspective on things. Think long term. So once you've established your partners, how do you foster a culture of team collaboration and team results while also rewarding individual success? Once our partner structure is determined in each business, we create an additional pool of shadow stock for current and future key employees who are not partners. Shadow stock allows us to give an additional long-term incentive to our employees without it being a taxable event for them when we reward it. We also have a if you leave, you lose it policy with this stock. And in a successful company, that's a very effective incentive and retention tool for key employees. It provides a huge financial incentive in the company if there's a liquidity event. The plan has also been one of the biggest lessons for us over the years because with each company we made a few mistakes in allocating that pool, and over time we got much better at structuring how we distributed that stock. Our CEO at Ironworks will say that that's probably the #1 mistake that we made with that business. We allocated all of the shadow stock to the very early employees during the first year and a half. And now, 8 years later, we really have to find other ways to provide that kind of long-term incentive to key employees who have come on after that, or we have to create a new additional pool. In Posh Tots, we made the opposite mistake. Andrea and I started out to grow a hobby business for fun, and we created the shadow stock plan, and we never told any of our employees about it until 6 years later when we had an offer to sell the business. We had never allocated any of the stock in that pool to any specific person. At that point, we called this company meeting to discuss the offer with everyone before we made a decision. And as each employee walked into the room that day, they received an envelope as they came in, and inside was the amount that we had allocated to them from the value of that shadow stock pool if we accepted the offer. It was a big learning experience for me. It was a complete surprise to everyone, not just the offer that we had received, but also what was in that envelope. And it probably turned out to be one of the best days of my entire career. I actually think that I lost some of my hearing that day because it looked like a whole room full of people who had just won the lottery when they opened those envelopes. We had a lot of ladies who had been with us in customer service, really wonderful, loyal employees for many years. And for a lot of them, those checks equaled more than they made an entire year. So needless to say, they were very much in favor of us selling the business and that deal going through. That is the second huge benefit of having a shadow stock plan, because it's critical to any exit to have the buy-in of the management team if you want a smooth transaction and a smooth transition. When key employees, or in that case every employee, has a vested interest in a deal happening, you get a completely different reaction than if they didn't. So after several different experiences allocating these shadow stock plans, our current approach that we've landed on is to allocate no more than half of the shadow stock pool during the first 2 years, allocate 25% during years 3 and 4, and make ourselves hold back the remaining 25% for years 5 and beyond. That approach makes us much more disciplined and forces us to think longer term than just that initial team. Over time, we're also better able to assess each employee's contribution to the business and tie their percentage of that pool back to it. The next subject I want to touch on is recruiting. I actually started my career in recruiting, and I firmly believe that hiring your initial team will be one of the most critical things that you'll do in any startup. In most cases, I think it'll make or break you. But my advice is to not get out of recruiting. Stay in the recruiting process at all levels of your company as long as you possibly can. Remain active in that. The general rule of thumb that we've seen is that A players hire other A players, but B players hire C players, and C players hire D players. And don't let that start in any area of your company. One of the questions that all new entrepreneurs struggle with is, do you hire for personality or do you hire for experience? And that depends on the exact role that we're filling. If you need a technical specialty, which often we do, then that person's experience level is obviously critical and equally important. But when it comes to hiring someone in account management, marketing, PR, recruiting, sales, we have had vastly more success hiring based on that person's personality than we have on their applicable experience. To sum it up, we've found that you can teach someone a skill set, but you can't teach someone to be likable, to be fearless, to be determined, and at the same time to be a team player. Some of the most expensive lessons we learned over the years were in recruiting and marketing and PR. And from consulting businesses to software companies to retailers, if you can get an effective PR campaign going, it is worth 10 times the same dollar spend if you had applied it to advertising. We learned the benefits of doing our PR internally. My partner at Podge Tots, Andrea, had been a parole officer for 12 years before we started up that business. And my entire experience up until that point was starting consulting companies. So neither one of us knew a whole lot about PR. We thought we needed a PR firm, so we went out and hired one. And months later, we realized we were getting absolutely no return on our investment. And we were paying our PR firm to establish relationships with editors that we realized we really needed to have ourselves. So we started thinking about doing our own PR. And Andrea has a very warm, very friendly personality. She is one of those people you can talk to for 10 minutes and you think that you've known her your whole life. So we decided she had the perfect personality for PR and that she would take a shot at handling it. We started by looking up the editorial calendars for the magazines that we wanted to target and proactively submitting ideas and product images for their upcoming articles. In the PR business, they call that submitting one-sheets. There's several online sources available now that allow you to automatically receive editorial calendars from any set of thousands of publications that you want to choose. Or you can simply just find them on their individual websites. We also offered our services back then to a Hollywood set decorator free of charge, and we also offered her some free product. And through her connections, our furniture ended up on some movies and TV shows, and that led to articles in People and Time and USA Today, and the whole PR wheel started to turn and it all started to feed on itself. We realized that freelance writers often waste a lot of time calling multiple sources for product images when they need them for articles. And so each time they would have to talk to multiple people and explain what size file they needed, what format they needed in order to get what they want. So we created a readily accessible photo library of all the product images for 350 of our vendors. And that became their favorite go-to source for images, for all of the editors and freelance writers that wrote articles about the kids industry, kids business. We could turn around any image file to them in a matter of minutes. And in return, those writers and editors called us very often, and we established a great personal relationship with many of them. They listed us as a source for those products. The secret to our PR success was fairly simple. We figured out how to be a valuable resource to the media by making their jobs easier. I left the topic of sales for last, but in my mind, ours has been really the most simplest of formulas. Sales is typically not a major concern, actually, has been of any of our companies after the first couple of years after they've gotten started. And I know we're probably in a small category there for saying that, but we are very fanatic about our customer philosophies. And after a couple of years, we found that most of our business comes in by word of mouth, customer referrals, repeat businesses, former clients who change companies, they switch and go with other firms, and they want to work with us again and call us. At Ironworks, their company mission statement has been boiled down to a very single, simple mantra: never fail a client. And this commitment is really prevalent across all of our ventures. Simply put, our philosophy is spend your clients' money like we'd spend our own, and treat every customer like they're going to tell 10 other people about us, because eventually they probably do. And if you ever get a chance to read about some of the great corporations that have great sales, great customer service, Zappos is one of my favorite business stories. Theirs is a really inspiring lesson in customer service and sales excellence. So to summarize, these are the 9 things that as a partner group we wanted to share with you this morning about launching a venture. We believe that hopefully this is our most valuable advice and the most important lessons that we learned during our startups. Is evaluate why you want to own your own business, recognize that freedom and flexibility and money usually come after several years of hard work. Define your purpose and passion and make sure that the business aligns with those things. Get the buy-in and total support of your family. Be prepared for some pessimism along the way, and don't second guess yourself after you get going. Choose your business partners carefully, have those tough conversations up front, and keep a realistic perspective on the long-term relationships that you have with them. Consider creating an additional pool of shadow stock for current and future key employees who are not partners. Remain active in the company's recruiting activities, and hire for personality first in non-technical roles. Consider building an internal PR team, establish your media relationships, and figure out how you can make their jobs easier. And never waver on what's doing right for your customer. Spend your customer's money like you would spend your own. I hope these are helpful in launching your own entrepreneurial endeavors, and I definitely hope that it keeps you from making some mistakes that we have made along the way. Entrepreneurs have an inherent internal drive to want to build something and create something great. Optimism is the heart and soul of every entrepreneur. They believe in making things happen, they believe in the future, they're willing to invest in it, they have faith in their vision when others just don't see it or they just don't see it yet. I was giving an interesting data point a few months ago that I wanted to share with you regarding the risk of a startup. Every year there's a list published called the Greater Richmond Companies to Watch list. These are the local startups that seem promising but that are not yet funded. And over the last 4 years, 43 companies have made that list. Of those 43 companies, only 1 has gone under, and it's resurfaced with new management since then. Compare those companies to the list on Richmond's top 50 employers for the year 2000. These are supposedly the safer jobs. The companies on that list included Circuit City, Hollig Myers, Reynolds Metals, White Oak Semiconductor, which was Kimanda, Land America, formerly Richmond headquartered companies like Crestar, Trigon, SuperValue, American Home Products, Overnight, and recent downsizers, Capital One, Media General, and GE Financial. I thought that was an interesting thought to end on this morning, because if someone is unwilling to work really hard, the startup path is definitely not for them. But for those who may shy away from an entrepreneurial endeavor due to perceived risk relative to a large corporate environment, I hope this gives you another perspective to consider. It certainly did for me when I heard it. So the best of luck to each and every one of you on your future ventures. Thank you.